This next segment, we're going to move over to the Olympics, which somehow we haven't talked about yet. It's been happening for a little bit. We haven't really. There's been a lot of controversies this year. I will say, we're not going to talk on all of them because not all of them not necessarily need to be brought onto this show. But I think this one's a very interesting one, and we're going to talk about the entire scandal around Canada's women's soccer team, where they apparently were flying a drone, pulling a Bill Belichick a little bit, flying a drone over to the top of another team's practice. A little bit of Spygate going on. And a lot of people were very pissed about this, understandably. A lot of people got fired for it. A lot of people got canned. I believe the head coach as well had to step down.
Yeah.
Even though she said that she was not involved with the entire situation with the drone. That's what she said. I'm just saying.
She very much.
I am saying what I'm reading. I am reading an ESPN article. Do not shoot me. I am reading an ESPN article. She said that she did not direct the staffers who operated the drone. Take that as you will. I am saying nothing. Please don't sue me. She also said that this does not represent the values of that our team stands for and all of that fun stuff. But basically what ended up happening, as Caleb was telling me before the podcast, which I didn't know, is that Canada still did really well, all things considered, with having to win 3 games to qualify very impressively, and ended up getting, I think you said, to the semifinals, right? So a very, very solid run.
They just qualified, so they still could win gold, right?
Oh,
it's
shit.
Still very much in play.
Never mind. I'm out of the loop. I haven't been following Olympics that much, but
they just qualified for the quarterfinals tonight.
That's insane.
So
that's incredibly.
That was the big hurdle.
Yes.
Yeah, because they got
that's incredibly impressive with everything they've been through. I think the biggest thing that I just want to point out more than anything else is it wasn't the actual players that did it. Which I've seen a lot of people saying, like, send Canada home as a whole. I've heard that, which is insane. Like, there's so many players, especially with the Olympics. I have such a huge issue with trying to ban or suspend a player from a game or a tournament in the Olympics, with how insanely hard it is to get there for so many of these athletes. You got to realize that the prime, I mean, I'll put it in an NFL perspective, actually. If we are talking about NFL prime, that's maybe like 7 or 8 years for a lot of those elite players, and that's pretty long. That's a long career in the NFL. That's 2 Olympics. That is 2 Olympic games. To get there, it is just remarkably impressive to even be able to get there, let alone multiple times. So I think that had to go into the consideration with why obviously as bad as a lot of the penalties were for Canada, they weren't going to just kick them out of the games, because so many of these athletes worked their ass off to get here, and they're showing that now because obviously they've gone and won against some very tough teams to get and put themselves in the position that they are now in, where penalties don't matter anymore. Time to just win. That's at this point, that's all that matters. And sure, they're playing without their head coach. Sure, they're playing on the back end of this entire thing, but it's very remarkable what they've been able to do, frankly. Like it is very impressive. I know there's been a lot of controversy around Canadian soccer as a whole. I do not know the details on it, sadly, off the top of my head, but I know in the last few years we've seen a lot of changes going around with Canadian soccer. I know there's been a lot of moves inside of I believe, the upper end of it. I think they've had their what would it be? Executive director, whatever the term would be. I think they've had them be replaced a few times. Like, there's been a lot going on with Canadian soccer. It's kind of where I'm trying to go, as somebody who is not the most educated on the topic. But I know that there's been a lot going on with it. So hearing about this is just like the cherry on the top of it, to my knowledge of it. And it's incredibly devastating for all these athletes who have worked their asses off to put themselves in this position just for the team and basically the company of Canadian soccer to just fuck them.
It's just so incredibly deflating, given how improved both, especially on the women's side and on the men's side too, how improved Canadian soccer has been. I mean, Canadian soccer was basically a laughing stock for the entirety of its existence, right? But then we're finally starting to see success with the women winning gold and having success before that. And then even like this year in the Copa America, Canada having a lot of success.
Yeah.
And has starting to have, like lots of star players
This
like
women's team
Alphonso
specifically has
Davies
been
and
terrific. Like for the last little bit, that has been the
yeah.
big conversation. Like it's at least to me as someone who doesn't follow soccer that much, I still heard plenty about how good this women's team was going into this Olympics and how they really have a shot at doing something special here.
Absolutely, but I think it sucks because of the air that it takes out of it, especially if the players didn't know about it. I think there's one New York Times article that I was reading about it. So I guess again in the Athletic, with how this is linked, the Athletic's going to get a lot of shout outs today. But I think this paragraph, let me just get who this article is by to credit it right. Mark Palillo and Meg Linehan. This paragraph I think sums up everything pretty well. It says, ultimately, while players were likely entirely unaware of the systemic use of surveillance, they unwittingly benefited from it. And it's the same reason why FIFA is investigating Canada on fair play grounds, which they eventually docked them the 6 points for.
Right.
It was unfair to Canada's players if they received an advantage from the program, and it was unfair to their opponents at the same time. The players are not at fault, but they have been drawn into this either way. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. It's very much, at least from how it's being shown, an upper like management kind of issue. This isn't a player's issue, so it's great to see the players going
as another crazy thing. Yeah, I don't know. In an article I'm reading right now, I just noticed this comment. I want to throw this out here because I think this is nuts. But ESPN apparently reported that U.S. soccer has been aware of Canada's teams, both men and women's, attempting to view their closed practices for not just this Olympics, for years, apparently. So this has been a thing that's been happening for a long time, which I do remember you pointing out something before the podcast, which makes sense as for the connection as to why that could have been the case.
Yeah, there's recent reports, like literally as of recording, like just that I didn't know about before kind of doing a little bit of research before the segment, that this might have even been going on with John Herdman at the helm. So that's years and years and years ago. And yes, the men's team, what I've heard with the men's team is that there were reports of it going to happen at Copa America. But basically what happened is the head coach, Jesse Marsh, learned about it and basically shut it down. Like it was happening without his knowledge and he shut it down, is what he claims. So who knows how that all played out. Either way is not a good look on them, and yeah, it very much feels like one of those things. We already have kind of been getting a slow drip of more information the longer it's gone on, but it really does feel like the yarn really hasn't been all the way unwound yet. I feel like there's a lot to come on this, and who knows how bad it will get for Canadian soccer and how much is going to be implicated, and you just really hope it doesn't sour the accomplishments of these athletes. Like I think that's the big thing. Yeah, maybe biased as a Canadian saying that, but
yeah, well, no, I think in general, I mean, I wouldn't want to see it. You know what, a great example of it actually would be exactly why, despite what's been going on with Ukraine and Russia, the Russian athletes are still being allowed to compete in the Olympics just under a different flag. Not under their flag is the way I'm kind of trying to explain it. Or that's what's been happening for the last little bit. So Russia will still send people, but they'll be under a separate, I don't remember what the actual name of it is, but they're not under Russia. They're just competing almost independently in a certain sense. They don't want the medals to be given to Russia is basically the idea, but they don't want to take away those opportunities from these athletes who have nothing to do with what is going on in Ukraine. So it's that type of thing, right? Where like they're being screwed by they're being screwed by a situation that isn't necessarily their fault. They playing for a country that just has done all of these things wrong, I guess. Like, it's not their fault what country they play for, is what I'm trying to say. I'm tripping all over my words over here. But it's that type of thing where it's you gotta hope that it doesn't screw the athletes. Yeah.
The biggest thing that I think I get frustrated with in this scenario is now there will never really be. I think that the reason I brought up that paragraph from The Athletic, I think is very well written in terms of just clearly defining the outline of this, is that the players, while they may not have known, they unwittingly benefited from it. And no matter how hard we try, it is going to be impossible to separate those two outcomes. Because there's the success that they've had and the, like, to put it bluntly, like, cheating that was going on.
You'll never know. We will never know who was watching that drone footage.
Yeah.
We know who was taping it, but we don't know who watched it.
Yeah, we don't know to what extent it was being used, and I think that matters a lot. The one thing I will put out there, and now this is less of a declarative statement and more just being a dumb, ignorant North American who doesn't know a lot about soccer. In my head, I do wonder how much this matters in terms of what footage they're getting, because I know, obviously, I'm sure it matters. So maybe this is more of a chance for me to learn things.
Okay.
But in terms of like Spygate in the NFL, very clear to me how that translates to, like, if you know a team's offensive or defensive playbook, you're gonna fucking whip their ass.
So Caleb.
But I don't know how it works.
And so in soccer, it isn't that different, because defenses will run a certain defensive scheme, and they'll have a certain amount of players on the field in that certain position, and they'll obviously run drills. Like, for example, I think about it more like in hockey, a lot of teams have a certain breakout style they like to use, or a breakout like drill, right? If that makes sense. Yeah. So like every single time they'll set it up the same way. It's like a breakout play. So they'll set it up so, okay, I'm passing to this guy, he's going to pass to that guy, and all that. They're going to plan that out. If the other team knows that he's going to pass to that guy, they can throw a guy in the middle, intercept it, go score. Same thing with soccer. If you know where the defenders are going to be because you have watched them set up these defensive formations before, it's the same thing as football. In a very the football we know. It's a very similar to the football we know in that sense. So it's to my understanding, again, I'm more in the same boat of you than the boat of being knowledgeable on soccer, but I do understand that. It absolutely does matter. Like, there is still, okay, even if it just looks like it's a bunch of people randomly running around the soccer field, it is not that.
Good to know. Good to know for the audience. And
I apologize, soccer fans, and football fans. I apologize, football fans, for the disgrace the Trick Play podcast has brought you.
It's okay. We're trying our best. We're putting our eyes on the beautiful game for once.
There you go.
Sweet. I've done maybe like one other time in the history of this podcast.
There you go.
Yeah. The one thing I will maybe throw over to you.
First time in my life defending soccer.
There you go.
Yeah.
The one thing I will ask is, obviously there was the penalty of 6 points in the Olympics, and then their coach being suspended from soccer for a year. Do you think that is enough of a punishment? Or is it too much of a punishment?
I feel like...
Where do you kind of stand on that?
The assistants... Did you say they're only being sent for a year? Is that actually what it was?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's
correct.
Late. I feel like the points penalty is great. I think the points penalty makes a lot of sense, because you forced the players to... You think about it like this. Even if they had a tactical advantage, they still had to win 3 straight games which is still not easy, even if you know what's like all of the things that are apparently on this drone.
3 straight games, and there's no way they were recording practices since the Olympics have started and since it came out, right?
Very
I think we can agree on that,
I think,
right? Like,
yes,
it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen.
Once it was out, it's out.
Yeah, once the cat's out of the bag, you're not throwing the drone back out again. Like, it's not going to happen. It's little Billy ain't going to be playing with his drone in the crowd no more. But it's I think the points is very fair. I would have been not opposed to sending the assistants off for an early retirement, because that is it's an insane thing to try. It's cheating. You're cheating. 1 year especially is insane, because if you think about it, they're going to be back for the next Olympics now. So what's the point, right? What's the point of 1 year? I know, obviously, there's other tournaments, there's other things I'm sure they're working in, but like, it's only a year. In the Olympic world, a year is nothing, right? That's the way that you got to look at it. So it's I don't know. 6 points feels right. This other thing doesn't.
Everything else.
I would have given longer suspensions, maybe even a ban.
Yeah, and I do want to I do feel like we've more or less been on the Canadian side of it, but I do want to point out that there is nuance in it, that we're not supporting the actions of what was going on, very much so supporting the players. I do completely agree with you that it does feel like more of a slap on the wrist.
It's an absolute disgrace to Canadian soccer, which has been trying to improve in the last few years, because of the fact that these are not unknown things. There's been a lot of controversy around Canadian soccer in the last few years, and right as it felt like we were actually getting somewhere with specifically this women's team and how good it is, just to see this happen, it's frankly incredibly fucking disappointing. And I don't think, truthfully, with how good this team has been, sure, it would have helped a ton. They don't need to cheat. They're good. I know it's crazy,
seeing, right?
I know it's crazy. It's crazy to say. It's crazy to say, because like obviously it matters. It matters. If they had that footage, it matters. But they're still good. They still are good enough to win. We're seeing that. So why would you even do it in the first place? Obviously, competitive advantage. You can still be good and cheat. We've seen the Lightning do it with the salary cap for years. But I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird situation for sure. We've talked a lot about controversial shit this episode. Controversial.
Oh, we love controversy.
I feel like I've had to do a lot of dancing to avoid getting sued. That's how I know.
Trick Play Podcast. Let me bring the mic up for this one. Trick Play Podcast. We love controversy. If you want to bring us controversy, we can handle it.
Caleb, since we're now gaming YouTubers, I really hope you do not stick to that mantra. I feel like gaming YouTubers in the last little bit. Don't do anything disrespectful related to a doctor's degree. Cough, cough.